Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Sandy Beach, and I'm an alcoholic. How you all doing? Well, I certainly enjoyed that sobriety countdown. I just think it's so great that somebody with 24 hours is here, starting on this incredible journey that when we first arrive here, it seems impossible, and yet we're confronted with the evidence, overwhelming, especially if you attend a conference like this, that Alcoholics Anonymous indeed works, and I'm certainly grateful, and I know you all are, to be assembled at another event like this, to really just rejoice in what sobriety is. And I'm delighted to be part of this. I came into AA in 1964, and I haven't been drunk since my first meeting, and I owe it all to not drinking. That is the reason I haven't been drunk. Now, somewhere after coming into AA, I got happy with not drinking, and now we're talking about a miracle. That is something that I'm a great believer in, that if you're in AA and you're not happy, you're doing it wrong. You're just doing it wrong. And I remember telling that to some of the people I sponsor, and they go, "But I don't have a job. And I owe a lot of money, and I do this," and there's a whole list of things that has to be straightened out before they can get comfortable with life. And I still say, "You're doing it wrong." I'm a hard-nosed sponsor. Because I really believe it. I believe that the power is here to give us if we work this program, a new perspective on life, so that as it's going up and down and everybody gets their shares of the good and the bad and so on down, there's a fundamental realization deep down inside that in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, all is well. And to me, that's what is the gift of sobriety, is that new perspective. And for those of you that are new and you may not believe that AA doesn't have the power to do that, well, alcohol certainly did. I didn't have any money, didn't know where the rent money was, all worried about it, go in the bar, have 3 drinks. Suddenly I became a philosopher. Who needs the rent money today? It's not due till tomorrow. Let's live a day at a time and enjoy life today. Why do I have to worry about the rent money? And I was given a new perspective. And it was a wonderful perspective. It set me free from the trials and tribulations of the daily routine. And it was a power known as alcohol. And so all of us alcoholics have to understand that it's possible to have a new outlook on life when the circumstances still all screwed up. It's called drinking. And we didn't doubt that. I don't remember anybody coming up and saying to me when they were first starting out drinking, "Are you saying to me that if I drink that clear glass of vodka, my financial insecurity will go away?" And I said, "Yeah, it does for me." And I don't remember anybody saying, "Well, I'm not going to drink that vodka until you'll prove ahead of time that it'll work for me." Because there wasn't any way to find out if it was going to work except to drink it. And the same thing applies with the program. There isn't any way of proving ahead of time that these same wonderful things can happen to us until we're willing to try it. And I think that there's a lot of doubt in the beginning that such an incredible thing could happen to each one of us that would give us this new perspective that makes life suddenly make sense. We have a vision, and we can see how we fit in, and that life isn't such a great mystery, that there's a path to follow, and there's a plan to follow, and there's 12 steps that just give us the guidance. And as we're guided along, instead of trying to figure it out, it indeed becomes an incredible day-at-a-time journey. And so I think that's what's in store for the new guests that are here and the new members to this program. When I think about alcoholism, my own, you could ask if there's 500 people here, we'd have 500 definitions of what an alcoholic is. And I like to think back when I started drinking. I started fairly old. I was 19. And I hear nowadays people with 19 have 7 years sobriety, you know what I mean? So the world is changing, but I had made it all the way to college before I had my first drink. And when I think back on what I felt like as a human being before I had my first drink, I was a skinny, nervous teenager wondering what was going on. That was sort of what I remember. And I was greatly intimidated by the world. I was intimidated by the university. It seemed that everyone there was brilliant except me, and everyone had the social graces. Everyone understood the world, and then there was me, who was still trying to figure out what was going on and felt quite inadequate. Little did I realize there was a whole bunch of other people who had the same feeling, but since we never shared with one another, it was a mystery to me. And I can recall this particular incident very well. It was one of these events where at one of the smaller colleges in the university, they had 50 or 60 of us come together to get to know one another in a room about as big as this dance floor. And you just sort of arrived, and they said, now go out and introduce yourselves and chat and so on down. And so I arrived late, because that type of situation was very intimidating. And they were serving drinks. And I wasn't drinking. I was going to be an athlete, and also I'd been brought up in the Catholic Church, and I had there was something about purgatory. I don't remember the exact deal, but if you didn't drink until you were 21, you got 500,000 years off from purgatory, and I needed all of that at a minimum. There was a particular neighborhood. I grew up in Connecticut, and back in the 40s, there was just all through Connecticut, there was a tremendous epidemic of impure thoughts. And it just was all over the place, and you could see the cash register down in purgatory, just ding, 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 ding. And so I needed at least 500,000 years, and that was my plan for not drinking. So we had a young man who was a little bit out of touch with reality, not too much, but if he was centering his life on decisions like that. And I found myself in this situation and came in and walked around the room. People had already broken up into groups of 10, 3, 5, chatting away, just hello, hi, da-ding. And I came walking in, took a look at the room, and tried to figure out where I fit in. Started over with the first group with 10 people and started walking in, and I could see they looked up at me like, no, wrong group. And I went, oh, yeah, right, well, it's probably this group over here, these 3 guys that are talking over here. And I went over there, and the 3 of them just looked up simultaneously and just, no, wrong. So I went over to where 2 guys were just talking and figured I'd just sort of blend in with them, and they just kept right on talking. I must have stood there for 3 minutes, just right close to them. Kept right on talking. So I made the full circle of the room, went by about all 9 groups, and didn't belong in any of them. I was getting ready to do what I did a lot of, which is leave. I found that anxiety drops dramatically as you increase the distance between you and the thing that's making you anxious. There's probably some law, Newton's law of anxiety, that applies to that particular situation. But instead of leaving, I remember my roommates had been talking. You ought to drink. You know, everybody else is drinking. You stand out like a sore thumb. And stuff make you feel wonderful. So my eyes went over to the bar, and I said, well, tonight's the night. The hell with purgatory. We got a problem here, and we're going to deal with it. So I went over and ordered some kind of a whiskey drink and stood there and drank it down. Boom. And then sort of waited for this magic promise that was going to take place. And I waited an appropriate amount of time, 10, 11 seconds. Nothing was obviously happening, so I went back, got another glass, and another one of those things, and just sort of poured it down and waiting. And I almost walked out. I said, maybe this stuff just doesn't work. And I went back and got one more and stood at the bar with my back to the room, chatting with the bartender. Again, I felt nothing. I didn't have any impact of alcohol doing anything to me. But while my back was turned and I was engaged in a conversation with the bartender, the 50 mean guys left the room, and in their place were 50 of the nicest guys you have ever seen. I turned back around, and the entire room was looking at me going, "Please join our group. Come over." And I just kind of looked at them and said, "You're going to have to wait your turn. I'm going to just spread myself." And I just started around telling jokes at every little group, mixing in, meeting people, just going on, and I said, man, this is incredible. And so as I look back on that first night, alcohol didn't change me, but it changed the world that I lived in into one fine place. And the people in it became people with principles and value, and they were nice to one another, and there was filled with love. And then I was puking outside, but I had my little brush with the alcoholic world, and felt terrible the next day, the hangover and the dry heaves and sweating and just sick all day long. Probably had 11 hours of feeling absolutely crummy. And on the other side, offsetting the 11 hours of feeling crummy, was the 3 minutes of feeling wonderful. And as far as I was concerned, that was a deal I would accept every day. And I didn't realize it, but that set me up. I was an alcoholic waiting to happen, and it happened. And I look back at it, and I agree with old Clancy that it isn't so much what alcohol does to us as opposed to what it does for us that makes us different from the non-alcoholics. Because as the years have gone by, I've had an opportunity to visit with some of my roommates from school, none of which are alcoholics. And one of them lives down in Dallas. His name is Roy, and I like to visit him. I go down there sometimes, speak at a Texas AA roundup, and he likes to come. He thinks AA is just the greatest. It saved his old roommate, and he just thinks everybody's having such a blast. And I told him if he'd just drink a little more, we'd get him in here, but he's just not an alcoholic, so he's going to miss out. And so we had a conversation one night, and this was probably about 10 years ago. And I said, Roy, I'm trying to sort of get the difference between you and me as far as alcohol is concerned. Now, you and I, we started about the same time, and it seemed to me we did some good partying and so on down, and now we're both 50 years old. What do you think, if you had to just tell, if a reporter came up to you and interviewing you and said, Mr. Roy, what does alcohol mean to you? What is alcohol in your life? How important is it? What is it? What are some of the things that would pop into your head? So he sat back and thought a little bit, and he said, well, I'll tell you, my wife and I are both gourmet cooks, food lovers, and I suppose one of the first things that would pop into my head is how wonderful alcohol makes food taste. And I remember going, how wonderful alcohol makes food taste? I just sort of chuckled to myself because it was one I never would have guessed. I mean, alcohol makes food taste good. I remember thinking to myself, going down or coming up? I mean, alcohol. We're talking about two different people here. Alcohol makes food taste good. And then he goes on to talk about how another big thing with alcohol, at the end of a work day, he comes home and he'll go out and mix himself a drink or have a beer and sit down and just sort of drink this down and then go up and take a shower. And it's sort of the transition between the working day and the evening of being with his family and doing the things at home. It's a way of sort of ending the workday. Never again did I think of alcohol as a one-drink transition from here to there. And then the final thing he was willing to concede was that every so often a group of friends would get together on a Saturday night, and this would be a way of livening the party up. People would have good fellowship, and it was just sort of a social elixir. And that was his total summary of alcohol. And I noticed that he did not once say alcohol was the secret of life. He never said that. And that's what I would have said if anybody had asked me, what is alcohol? Is alcohol? Man, that's how you make it through life. That's what alcohol is. Alcohol is my higher power. Alcohol is everything. Alcohol is what you do when you can't make a decision. If I can't make my mind up, I'll go have a drink, then I'll be able to make my mind up. And then, alcohol is what you do when you're tired. You need energy. Go get a drink. Alcohol is what you do when you can't sleep. You got too much energy. Have a drink. Pass out. Alcohol is what you do when you don't have any money. Get a drink. You can figure out how to bum money. Alcohol is what you do when you're afraid and you desperately need courage to make it out on a job interview. Just get some drinks. Put some vodka in there. Maybe you can go in and act like you're brave. Alcohol is what you do just about anything. It just became the entire center function of my life. And so you might say that alcohol was my problem. And yet I'm standing up here, and now I've had a chance to think about it, and I don't really think it was my problem. Again, one of my favorite speakers is Clancy, so I steal a lot of his stuff. But I have to agree with him that isn't my problem. Alcohol isn't my problem. Alcoholism is my problem, but alcohol really isn't my problem. And let me explain what I mean by that. If alcohol was my problem, then all I would do is not drink. And that would be the end of my problem. Just like when I was in the Marine Corps back in the 50s, I found out I was allergic to penicillin. Guy gave me a shot of penicillin, I almost died. My body just swelled up and had bright rashes all over my head and arms and legs. I mean, it was just an awful, grotesque thing. It lasted 3 or 4 days. The heart was beating. And, it was just an awful thing. Doctor came in and says, your problem is penicillin. Do not ever take any more penicillin. And I went, right. And all by myself. I don't take penicillin. The guy told me, if you take any more of this, it's going to kill you. And I can be totally depressed. A relationship can just have ended. And I got the flu. And the doctor says, I'm going to give you penicillin. And I go, no penicillin, even no matter what condition I'm in. High, low, tired, you name it, I just don't take penicillin. That's it. I don't hang around with other people who can't take penicillin. I don't go to meetings at night and talk about how I have to take myosin and other people have to take penicillin, and why was I singled out to not be able to use the best antibiotic we have, and what if I get this and that. I just don't take penicillin. That's it. Same doctor tells an alcoholic, you take any more of that stuff, it's going to kill you. And we've had not one episode of lying on the floor and puking and rashing and sweating and getting arrested and teeth knocked out and sweating in the wintertime and no one speaking to us and thrown out of the big bed and fired from jobs and no driver's license and clothes all screwed up and friends leaving us. We've had thousands of instances of that, and the doctor says if you keep doing that you're going to die, and we keep doing it. So the problem is funny. I got thinking about it. What is the difference? Well, between having an allergy to penicillin and allergy to alcohol. Turns out, when I really get thinking about it, my problem wasn't alcohol. My problem was sobriety. Every time I was sober, I hated it. I couldn't stand being sober. I was out there alone. I needed a means of becoming unsober. And that means was alcohol. That's how I got away from that dreadful condition known as sobriety. It was terrible. It terrified me. That's why when anybody would suggest that I stop drinking, I'd just go, you don't understand. If I stop drinking, I will be sober. All the time. Sober. All the time. Sober when you're afraid. Sober when you're trying to have sex. Sober when you're trying to get a job. Sober when you're trying to read. Sober when you're trying to sleep. Are you kidding? I mean, let's give a guy a little slack. Sober? You mean totally unarmed out there in the world. It's a mean world out there. You want me out there alone against the world without my friend? So isn't that ironic that the real problem was I didn't want to be out there by myself. So I had a chance to think about this. As I said, I started drinking when I was 19. I was immediately a daily drinker. I'm one of these primary alcoholics. You drink socially 10, 11 minutes, cross the line, and boom, you're just gone. So I don't relate to those of us in the program I drank successfully 10, 20 years, and then the filter broke. And, bam, boy, all the trouble started coming in. There was a whole bunch of us that were born without a filter. We just, bam. Never did I drink trouble-free. I never drank without getting drunk. And it just, boom. And so when I got out of school, I joined the Marine Corps, and I flew jets for them for 12 years as a practicing alcoholic. Very exciting life. I could tell you a lot of funny stories about what we were doing with your taxpayer money, giving us drunks those funny little toys to play with. But that doesn't have anything to do with being an alcoholic. I look back, and alcoholism was slowly moving into the front and center in my life, eclipsing flying jet fighter planes. It just cut a wedge right in there. And that was my dream. I mean, I just lived that. I just loved the high performance planes and getting out there and being top dog, whatever you want to call it. It was just exciting, and yet alcohol slowly worked its way in, and I found myself compromising, drinking way on into 4 or 5 in the morning, and then go fly at 6 or 7, and be in a terrible shape, and starting to have withdrawals in airplanes, and all kinds of horrible things happening. And there came a time after about 11 years of flying that I began to not trust the pilot of the plane I was in, which was me. It was just, this guy he gets in the wrong plane in the morning, and the plane captain comes over, Captain, you belong in plane number 7. Ooh, yeah, sorry about that. Climb down, go get in the other airplane. So it was getting real shaky, but the main thing was I was having terrible withdrawal symptoms, flying. I've since met some guys who had similar problems, and they used to take vodka up in the plane with them, and I realize now that was more sensible than going through withdrawals in airplanes. But anyway, the end of this thing was that I was starting to lose consciousness, lost vision, heart palpitations, sweating, almost dropped a couple of them in, and finally I just went, I better go see the flight surgeon about all this. And as soon as I told him my story, he agreed we had a terrible problem and sent me off to Pensacola, Florida for a special board of flight surgeons. And this is back in the 60s, and in those years, the U.S. Navy did not have a diagnosis of alcoholism. There were no alcoholics. Period. There just weren't any. You had to be something else, manic depressive or suicidal or something, but nobody was an alcoholic. So I'm down there just reeking of alcohol because I drink all night and go in and these guys are examining me and I got high blood pressure, my hands are shaking, my eyeballs are just blood red. You could just smell that clammy odor just all over the body and they're figuring out, wonder what's wrong with this guy. He's having these terrible things in airplanes, bizarre happenings. And I was there for 2 weeks, and at the end of that 2 weeks, they left it up to the psychiatrist to figure out what was wrong, and my diagnosis was written up as a childhood fear of flying that had suddenly manifested itself in the early 30s of this young man. And I knew that wasn't the truth, but I didn't have the courage to question any of this, and suddenly found that I was taken off a flight set. It was just crushing. It was just a terrible ego blow. I was back to Cherry Point, North Carolina, Marine Corps Air Station, waiting orders. Headquarters Marine Corps now had to decide, what do you do with a pilot whose hands are shaking, he can't find his way around airplanes, he can't see too well, he's got heart palpitations and sweating. Now I look back, it's fairly obvious. I was retrained as an air traffic controller. And spent my last 2 years of drinking, bringing planes in bad weather when they couldn't see the runway, and I'm on a radar scope bringing these guys in to the runway. And funny thing, you know how you cover one eye up when you're driving when you see two white lines? Same thing on a radar screen. When you got two center lines, you just get one that way. But anyway, there aren't any horror stories. Nobody crashed, and I don't have to deal with that during those years. But that allowed me to get into daily drinking. I was married, had 6 kids. Just keep things confusing. And I'm just trying to be a provider and survive, and all I am is I'm a daily drunk who is just trying to make it through. I mean, it was just, the life became one big terror. I mean, I just face these crises every day that today are just a joke. Somebody wants to talk to you. Well, that was a crisis. They'd like you to show up at a meeting. No, a meeting? I can't be at a meeting, my God. I mean, these are the things we take for granted today, and yet back when our alcoholism is reaching its peak, those are just overpowering things. I got a meeting 7 days from now. I better start getting drunk and getting ready. They might even ask me a question in the meeting, and you know how life just becomes panic-stricken and just so filled with that. And so that's how that last year went. And I got into daily drinking, lost about 50 pounds, malnutrition, came back and was in a career school at Quantico when I had a grand mal seizure. And that gets everybody's attention, and I was off to Bethesda Naval Hospital, admitted to the ward, the regular person's ward, to see what caused the convulsion, and I was there 3 days when I went into the DTs. And just freaked out, in a straight jacket and back into the lock ward. And so I ended up in the nut ward in 1964 and was locked up for 6 months under the care of psychiatrists, and they would be into damn clay class and basketball and all the rest of the crazy people that are in there, 4 or 5 drunks, and it was incredible. There was no AA, and they're just talking about, mental problems and this and that. And about that time, Alcoholics Anonymous talked their way into the hospital, told us the psychiatrist that AA would help their drunks. And he said, well, we'll give it a try. And so I got to AA because a corpsman came into the nut ward and said, all drunks fall in. And so we were marched down to a meeting, and that was where I got my introduction to AA. When I got out of there, I did drink one more time over a weekend and called AA on my own. And on Pearl Harbor Day, my sponsor came over. He's another big Marine. He came to my house in response to that phone call, and he just sort of filled the doorway, and he just said, "Hi, my name's Bill. This is a 12-step call. I talk, you listen." I went, "Oh, shit." And I just looked at him and just went, "Oh, we got trouble here." So it was a meeting every night in the car, and that started it, and now things have happened. One of them, just for those of you that have been around a while and something didn't turn out right, I always like to tell this story. I went to a meeting every night for 2 years and got thrown out of the Marine Corps. I didn't get thrown out. For officers, they have a thing called Passover, and it's not a Jewish holiday. It is, you fail to get promoted 2 years in a row, and then you are asked to shove off. No hard feelings, but move on. And so that happened to me, and I'm out. And I had about 14 years, regular commission, and now I'm leaving. And no retirement, no nothing, just a sword. You got to keep your sword. So I got my 6 kids, and I'm going out. I don't know what I'm prepared for. I'm looking for a job. I'm trying to become a salesman, doing these kind of things. Money is bad. I'm going to a meeting every night, and I started developing a resentment because in my judgment, you shouldn't go to have something like that happen. You shouldn't go to a meeting every night and get thrown out of the Marine Corps. That was my bottom line. Just not supposed to happen. Now, I'm not telling anybody this because they'll get their nose in my business, so I'm keeping this quiet to myself. If you got a resentment, you want to keep it to yourself. People will take it away from you if you tell them about it. And best thing to do with resentment, get it in the room all by yourself. Lock the door. Just go in there. It's like putting yeast in bread. It just starts... Pretty soon you can't even fit in the room anymore. This resentment is growing and growing, and that's what was going in. The more I thought about it, I would keep repeating this to myself like a little speech. It's not fair to go to a meeting every night for 2 years and get thrown out of the Marine Corps. And I said, goddamn right it's not fair to get thrown out. It's like 2 guys talking back and forth. And and the more he'd say it, I'd agree with him. Goddamn right that's wrong. Look at those 6 little kids. Who's going to feed them? Yeah, who's going to feed them? And I don't know who I thought was going to feed them. I sure wasn't. I was too damn busy with this problem. We were talking about injustice, and where's justice, and where's all these things. And boy, that went on for a while. I'm going to tell you, that really went on, because in my judgment, I don't let my pigeons use that term. And in your judgment, who the hell needs your judgment? But in my judgment, that was totally unfair. Anyway, there came a time about 2 months after that I was out that I read a little article in the paper. I'd been complaining. I finally took my case to God, which I only did as a last resort. I wasn't really too close to God, but nobody else was listening. Look, God, for crying out loud, can't you see from up there? This is unfair. You guys go, the guy going to meet. Have you kept track every night for 2 years? Yeah, I know you've been keeping track, but here I am. I'm out, man. I'm out. You noticed up there? I know you're busy. And so I'm reading the newspaper, and there's a little story in the Washington Post back on page 6, and Marine Corps. So I'm looking there. Marine Corps instruction team killed in plane crash in Denver. And it turned out that was the unit that I was the operations officer of, and we traveled around the country putting on these Marine Corps presentations. And if I had had my way, I would have gotten promoted onto that plane. And I remember reading it and just going, God, that could have been me. And I knew that God knew I had just read that. Even though I put the paper down real fast, I knew Felt like somebody had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar, you know. Ooh. So I mumbled something about, well, if you just told me this was going to happen, I wouldn't have been so damn upset about going to him. And so I rethought through the issue, and now my official position is, most of the time, if you go to a meeting every night for 2 years and get thrown out of the Marine Corps, it's not fair. But sometimes it's okay. So if you've been around a while and unfair things have been happening, wait a while. You'll probably understand why they happened. As the big book says, more will be disclosed as we go along. And so I think what happened to me is what happens to everybody in AA. We come up against painful situations that become the great learning curve for us to understand the reality of this program. And so each one of us has had our own little stories that have occurred. And as I look back over the years, the painful events have indeed been the ones that have caused the most change. I am still amongst the category who doesn't seem to voluntarily change too well. There's an old saying, if you're new, this is really a two-step program. Don't drink and change everything there is about you. That's the only two things you have to do. We've sort of divided it into 12 steps in order to get it done. But change is the name of the game. And I don't know about you, but for prideful, self-centered guys like me, change is not something that just, boy, are we ready to do. And I'll give you an example of this. Early on, my sponsor and I were having an argument over some AA principle, and you knew who ended up on the wrong side of that one. And finally, he had several other people with lots of sobriety come over and agree with his position on the thing. So it was overpowering, and I said to him, very reluctantly, because this had gone on for a couple of weeks. I thought I had really had the insight on this. And I said, okay, Bill, you're right. And he said, no, you're wrong. And I said, same thing. He said, then say it. And I remember it was really different. It's a lot easier to say you're right than I'm wrong. I'm sorry, Sandy, I couldn't. I said I was wrong. It just doesn't come out right. And I realized I don't like to be wrong. And boy, we got a whole step on that. And when we're wrong, promptly admit it. But look at all the things that we've been wrong about. I think sobriety really doesn't consist so much of learning new things as unlearning old things. Chuck Chamberlain talks about uncover, discover, discard. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning who's an artist, and remember that sculptor who made this beautiful statue out of a block of granite, and they said, how'd you do that? And he said, I just took away everything that wasn't the statue. And I think that's what we do here. We just get rid of things. Get rid of things until what's left is pretty nice. It's a very unusual process, this spiritual program. If you're new, everything's backwards in a spiritual program. It isn't anything like regular life, where you figure stuff out. You know what I mean? Intellectual solutions and power-driven and goals, and I'm going to accomplish this. That doesn't have any applicability in here. Everything works backwards from the way it was out there. You start right off by winning by surrendering. Oh, having a problem? Just give up, and then you'll win. Oh, thank you. You want a lot of power? Admit you're powerless. And you'll have all the power you want. I will? It sounds like double talk. And it is compared to the way we used to think. And so for me, it was just a struggle getting rid of these ideas. I'm wrong about this, wrong about this. Look at all the things. And if you're new, let me tell you all the things you're wrong about. I haven't even met you, but I can just stand up here and tell you all the things you're wrong about. You are a wonderful person. There is a God that loves you. There's a part of you deep down inside that's one of the most beautiful things you will ever lay your eyes on. All you're going to do in this program is get all the garbage out of the way so you can see it. You were wrong when you thought you weren't an alcoholic. You were wrong when you thought no one in the world cared. You were wrong when you thought there wasn't any love in the world. You were wrong when you thought that you'd never have any friends. You were wrong when you never thought you'd have any self-respect. All these wrong ideas are what the program allows us to get free of. To me, that's what freedom and sobriety is all about, is walking away from the bondage of the past. All of those collection of ideas that was the real me. Well, when you ask me, who are you? And I read a book recently where the author presented a rather interesting proposition from when you're trying to think spiritually. And he suggested that you take a piece of paper and write down who you are. Just write down, I am a woman, I am 49, I am a housewife, I am an artist, I am this, and write down everything you can think of that you are. And then his suggestion or observation was, you've now written down everything that separates you from God. Because all of those things are identities that we've placed on ourselves, that this is who I am, I am, I am. And again, going back to Chuck C., who just captured it so well, that who we really are children of God. And everything else is an identity that we've superimposed on top of that has relatively little meaning compared to the real identity. And the more I focus in on this abstract identity of being a salesman or a lobbyist or driver or lover or dancer or whatever it is, the more it separates me from the reality of being a child of God. I've recently come to the conclusion, another sort of like Clancy statement, that alcohol isn't the problem. It's one of those thought provokers. That I already am all that I can ever become. Now that probably sounds like, wow, wait a minute, the guy's stopping working. But I already am a child of God. And what I have to do is go through the pain of recognizing that. And then I can't go beyond that. I can just get in touch with that. And life can consist of simply recognizing and delighting in this fact. Just the pure delight of the program. Look how much we delight in the new person's sobriety. Just to be there when somebody with 24 hours walks in. And it enables us to relive our own birth and rebirth into this program. And so there's just pure enjoyment in the things that already are, is what a day at a time is, rather than persisting in looking off to things as they aren't and wondering when they're going to be that way. I'm missing the journey of the day by focusing in on how beautiful everything already is. And to me, this is some of the freedoms that come to us. The last thing I'd like to say to the new people is how this, another way this spiritual program works has to do with problems. In a spiritual program, problems don't get solved. See, before we come here, we're always trying to figure out things. And we have this problem, and I'm an alcoholic, and I've got to figure out how to solve this. And our intellect would tell us, well, study alcoholism. Learn all about alcoholism, and then you'll be able to do something about it. And we see this in society all the time. We're going to have to learn more and do this and that. And yet we all know that if we were to take a practicing alcoholic and send him through Rutgers University and get him a PhD in alcoholism, all we'd have passed out on the living room floor is a smart drunk who, when he came to, would be able to explain to you precisely what was going on. Hey, I'm getting liver damage here, and I had that, and you had this subconscious, and certain genes. Give me another drink. Bam, out, cold.
Because our problem is captured in our first step. Doesn't say anything about being ignorant about alcoholism. It says alcohol. We're powerless to our alcoholism problem. And you know what happens? We take that alcoholism problem and we put it on the shelf over here and we go to meetings. And then we get a sponsor and then we make coffee. Nobody's even talking about alcohol. We're going, that's the wrong way to make coffee. I know, but I'm an alcoholic. I'm trying to worry about my alcoholism. Forget that and make the coffee. Okay, all right, I'm making the coffee. Okay, now I want you to serve on this committee. Now I want you to go over to the intergroup, and I want you to show up. All right, I'm going over there, and I'm going over there. When the hell are we going to deal with my problem? Do we ever talk about it? No, shut up. We don't want to hear about your problems. We want you to go over to the intergroup. And you need to use your car to drive some people around. All right, but when do we talk about my problem? We're not going to talk about your problem. Get in the damn car. Go over there. All right, shit. These people are crazy. So you do all these other things that haven't anything to do with your problem. And then a miracle happens and you miss it. So I'm going to point the miracle out so that when it happens, you'll recognize it for what it is, which is a miracle. You're going to be sitting down, you just bring the car back from doing another one of these damn errands or whatever it is, and you're going to be sitting in your house, and all of a sudden, it's going to occur to you. Now, when things occur to you, watch out. This is, you're beginning to get in touch with your intuitions now, and these little occurrences. It occurs to you that for the past 2 weeks, you forgot to worry about drinking. How do you like that? You forgot to worry about drinking. Think about that. A person who's just off of alcohol, their whole life centers on alcohol, forgot. You almost feel like getting a pad and writing it down. Hey, let's remember to worry about drinking. This is so unlike me. You forgot to worry about drinking. It just wasn't there. Where is it? Where is this problem? Where did it go? Well, how could you forget to worry about drinking? And that's the funny thing about this program. It talks about it in the big book. We have a daily reprieve contingent on our spiritual condition. As long as we maintain our spiritual condition, we will conveniently forget to worry about drinking. So the problem never got solved, it got removed. See, that's the difference of a spiritual solution. Never does get figured out. All of a sudden, you lose interest in why you're an alcoholic. I used to worry about, why am I an alcoholic? And the reason I worried about that was because I thought you could figure it out. And then you could solve it. And then we come in here and we don't figure it out. And we don't solve it. We just do what we're supposed to do and it gets removed. It just is held off to the side somewhere. It is not a part of my daily routine. It's just not there hounding me. And so we go after the rest of the character defects and we work on them until they get up and are no longer hounding us. And when they've been given us relief from that, and this, I think, is what is going on when the artist is sculpturing the statue. He is pulling away the character defects until what's left is what was there all along, that we were never able to see. And so if you're new, let me tell you what's going to happen. The sculptors in this program, especially if you have a mean sponsor like I had, they're going to get you getting rid of stuff, and they're going to have you throwing stuff out, and they're going to have you doing things that don't make any sense, and they're just going to start turning out a product. And pretty soon you're going to find that there's something deep down inside of you you never really knew was there. It's a very beautiful part of you. It's a very loving part. It's a very giving part. And you're probably going to see it about the second month. You're going to be sitting at a meeting. You were the new person in the group, and now you're not that new. And a brand new guy or gal is going to come in, and you see them over at the coffee pot, and they can't get coffee because their hands are shaking. So they take a third of a cup and bring it back to the table and put it down. And you look over at them, and then a very unusual thing happens. Your heart goes out to them. It just leaps out of your chest. Just incredible concern for the well-being of another human being. Sometimes it's so strong it scares the hell out of you. You're not into caring for other people. Not you, not Bobby Badass. That's not your cup of tea. But your damn heart just got yanked right out of there. And all week long, you don't go over and introduce yourself. You're not that wimpy yet. But you think about them. And you're thinking about, God, I hope he comes back. I hope he comes back. If he comes back, I'm going to go over and talk to him this time. I'm going to go over and say hello. I'm going to go over and say hello. And the next time at the meeting, he's not there. And you get worried. And about 10 minutes into the meeting, he comes in and you go, yay, yay. You're just sitting over, you're not even hearing what the hell the meeting's about. You're just going, yay, he's here, yay, yay. Like you're a cheerleader for this guy. You don't even know his name yet. Well, I'll tell you what's emerging. What's emerging is the beginning of your real identity. What's emerging is the essence of the goodness inside of you that has been so oppressed and hidden and squashed by this illness called alcoholism to the point that it almost is dead. And what we celebrate in here is the rebirth of this beautiful side, the spiritual side of all human beings. And when you see it come out, it just changes your vision of the whole world. It changes your vision of yourself. You start seeing this in other people. As you walk around in the world, you just see beautiful people who are having problems, just like everybody else. But they're not bad. They're great. And you can understand it. And you start operating in harmony. And instead of a job being something for you, it's a place to be useful. You come up with a whole different perspective on it. You start getting in harmony with the world. And it makes great music because there's a master score that's been written. And all we got to do is learn our parts. And when we play them right, it's beautiful music. And you want to see beautiful music? Look at this room. Watch what's happening here. We're talking about the wonderful thing in sobriety. Yeah. So let me just thank you all for inviting me up here. Alcoholics Anonymous is the most important thing in my life. I think without it, I'd be nothing. And with it, I'm everything I'm supposed to be. And if you're new, you can be everything you're supposed to be. Thanks a lot.